Hello Magic Makers, welcome to Storytime with Mombierella. This is a young adult fiction and may be inappropriate for some younger viewers. The Odd Sisters, A Tale of the Three Witches by Serena Valentino. Copyright, Disney Enterprises Incorporated, 2019. Chapter 2, After the End. Part 4. As she traveled, Circe couldn't help feeling that her heart was still with snow. She looked back at her mother's house, silhouetted against the crashing waves, with its witchcraft roof, dark green hue, and black shutters. It was the last place you would expect Snow White to live. Circe laughed, lost in her thoughts in the beauty of the landscape. She had missed Morningstar, with its brilliant lighthouse and glittering sea. Then, as she entered the castle, and her heart skipped a beat, Circe could see Nanny and her sister, the fairy godmother, in the distance, outside the gates. They looked like they were talking about something important. She sped up her pace, but a voice she hadn't expected to hear startled her. "Hello, Circe." Circe spun around, wondering where the voice had come from. Then, something soft brushed against her legs. It was Flans. The Odd Sister's cat was a tortoiseshell, telepathic beauty, with orange, black, and white markings. Flans! Circe squealed with delight, though it seemed Flans wasn't as happy to see Circe. She just looked up at Circe with narrowed eyes, shifting her weight from one marshmallow white paw to the other. As long as Circe could remember, Flans had always been there. When Circe was younger, the cat had almost been like another sister, the more level-headed sister in the house, the wisest, and most mysterious. There was so much more to Flans than Circe had ever suspected, and it was all in her mother's journals. She'd always felt she and Flans had an understanding, but that day something seemed different. "I'm so disappointed in you, my little one," the cat said. "But there's no time to discuss my broken heart. I must get back to your mothers. They've been waiting for you. We all have." Flans gave her a disapproving look. "I know, Flans. I'm sorry. I was trapped in the beginning." Flans blinked and said, "So the house took you to the place of its birth, and you took away your mother's powers to get out?" Circe didn't understand what the cat meant. "Of course I didn't, Flans. How was I to know taking away my mother's powers would release us from the beginning?" "So lofty Circe took away her mother's powers for noble reasons. Oh, I see. Well, you have much more to learn. When you took away your mother's powers, every spell they'd ever cast was broken, including the failsafe on the house. That's why you were able to return to the many kingdoms. We have so much to talk about, Circe. There's much you need to learn, and not all of it is in those journals. And that fairy tale book Snow White is reading now. If your mothers knew she was in their house, touching their things, do you have any idea how angry they would be, Circe?" Circe was past caring about what her mothers thought. "Oh, that's very nice, Circe," said Flans sarcastically. Circe had always thought she and Flans felt the same way about Lucinda, Ruby, and Martha. Of course, the cat loved them, but she remembered times when Flans would become so fed up with the Odd Sisters' theatrics that she would leave for days just to get away from them. Now it seemed Flans was more loyal to them than ever. "I've always been loyal to your mothers, Circe. Always. Long before you ever came into being. Don't forget that. I saw what they went through to bring you back. I saw them deteriorate into what they've become, all for the love of their precious Circe. You think they've destroyed everyone in their path? You think they're foul, murderous creatures? Well, I can say the same for you. You did this to them, Circe. Your life brought all this about. If there's nothing good left within them, it's because they gave it all to you. Remember, Circe, you are them. To hurt them would be like hurting yourself." Circe didn't know what to say. Flans' words wounded her deeply, threatening to break her heart into tiny pieces. It felt like one of her mother's mirrors. With each heartbreak, there was another crack in the mirror, and she wondered how long it would be before it shattered entirely. How long before it sliced at her insides like Grimhilda once described in the Book of Fairytales. "Do you know why they hate Snow White?" she asked. Flans adjusted her paws, giving Circe one of her characteristic looks. Circe could feel that Flans was surprised she hadn't worked it out on her own. "It was never really about Grimhilda. Not until she had your mothers, escorted out of the solstice celebration, humiliating them in front of the entire court. That is when their hate switched from Snow White to Grimhilda. They always hated that little brat. Don't call her that! Flans was beyond Cersei's anger. She saw into her heart. You have no idea why your mothers wanted to get rid of Snow White. Why they still want to see her dead. What did you do the entire time you were trapped in the beginning, if not read your mother's journals? You know nothing of the women you've condemned to solitude. Would you like to come with me to the castle, Flans? Flans didn't answer. Her silence stung Cersei's heart. And where are my mother's bodies? Are you so angry with me? You've left them alone and defenseless in the solarium, so you could condemn me? Flans didn't answer. Never mind. But don't think this conversation is over. Oh, I think it is. If you want to know why your mothers hate Snow White, tell the Brat Queen to look it up in your mother's journals. I imagine she'll find it in the section devoted to Grimhilda. I suppose you have one of your mother's mirrors in your pocket, so you can contact the Brat Queen? I do. I see. So you're not opposed to using your mother's magic when it suits you. You think you're helping Snow White by keeping her locked away in their house, leaving her alone with only a mirror for comfort and communication? Doesn't that sound like the life you were trying to save her from? Flans ran ahead before Cersei could answer, leaving her feeling desperately sad and alone. She had always thought she could count on Flans, but it was clear something within the cat had changed. Cersei missed Snow. They'd been together in her mother's house since it spirited them off to the beginning. It felt like a lifetime. But it had all happened in a matter of days. She'd felt so far away from Morningstar and from Tulip and Nanny, when she was only reading about them rather than being there to help them during the crisis caused by her mothers. And in that moment, Cersei realized how much she missed and depended on Nanny, how much she loved her. She felt terrible for leaving her alone to deal with all of this, and she couldn't bear to have Nanny upset with her. She saw her in the distance, and her heart desperately wanted to be with Nanny's. And before she understood what happened, she found herself magically transported into Nanny's arms and showered with love and affection. Oh, my dear sweet girl, I'm so sorry I hurt your feelings when I thought you would be better off if your mother stayed in the dreamscape. You know I only wish to protect you, said Nanny with tears in her eyes, kissing Cersei again and again and holding her face between her unbelievably soft hands. I'm sorry, too. I'm sorry I left you alone, Nanny. I see things much more clearly now. I know something has to be done about my mothers. I know you were only worried about me. I'm so sorry I stormed out like I did, leaving you on your own to deal with Maleficent. Can you ever forgive me? Nanny looked at Cersei's sad eyes. Oh, my darling girl, there's nothing to forgive. The house took you away. You didn't choose to leave. More importantly, what is that delightful advancement in your abilities? What do you mean? Did I teleport? Cersei asked, noticing the concerned look on Nanny's face. I thought you brought me here from across the field. Nanny shook her head. No, my dear, that was entirely your doing. And I don't think it was teleportation. Cersei blinked, confused. But all she could think about now was how happy she was to see her dearest Nanny, who never seemed to change, even in the wake of the Dark Fairy's death and the near destruction of Morningstar Castle. Her eyes sparkled with life and love for Cersei. Oh, my dear, I'm so happy you're here. I want to hear all about your adventures with Snow White, and what you learned when you read Gothel's story, said Nanny. But before Cersei could answer, they were distracted by the fairy godmother, screeching in the distance. Sister! Sister! She cried in distress. We have to go! We have to go! The fairy godmother wobbled towards her, completely discombobulated. She took several steps in one direction, changed her mind, and then went off in the other direction, back and forth. Is she okay? What's happened? Nanny and Cersei hurried to the garden, where the fairy godmother was shaking and fumbling with a letter she'd just read. Sister, what's the matter? Nanny asked. The fairy godmother looked up, her face filled with terror. Oberon says we have reason to believe the Odd Sisters are trying to lure Maleficent from the other side of the veil to fight at their side. Cersei felt her heart seize with panic. Can they do that? Do they have the power to bring people back from the dead like that? Nanny frowned. "I don't know, my dear. I don't know. They may." The fairy godmother seemed to notice Circe for the first time. "Oh, Circe, my dear, I'm so happy you're here. You're safe. You poor sweet thing. Everything you've gone through." Circe was enveloped in fairy godmother's arms. She hadn't expected her embrace to feel so much like Nanny's, to feel comforted and loved in the same way. She suddenly felt overwhelmed. Lucinda, Ruby, and Martha had always loved her desperately, loved her so much. This love, the love she felt from Nanny and her sister, was something quite different. It was pure. It wasn't tainted by sacrifice, the insatiable need to protect her at any cost. And Circe wondered if she was worthy of it. "Come on, my dear, let's go sit down," Nanny said, leading Circe to the garden outside of the conservatory. The conservatory was an architectural marvel of windows and a giant dome ceiling. Large French doors led to a lush garden filled with wandering roses, wisteria, honeysuckle, and jasmine. The scent was so sweet it made Circe's head swim. Once in the garden, they made themselves comfortable under a large blossoming tree filled with delicate pink and blue flowers. "I don't remember the tree being these colors," Circe mused. "Weren't the flowers white?" Nanny laughed and rolled her eyes. "This is the 3 good fairies' handiwork. They came back to help after Aurora's wedding." "Oh, are they still here?" Circe asked, squinting and looking around the garden for them. She didn't know how she felt having so many fairies about. It was strange enough being in the fairy godmother's company. Maleficent's death was still so fresh. Snow was right. She hadn't had time to properly process everything that had happened. Circe felt conflicted about the fairies. If they hadn't been so cruel to Maleficent, she might never have destroyed the fairylands and been forced to turn to the odd sisters for help. She would never have created Aurora and lost herself in the process. And Circe's mothers, her meddlesome mothers, if they hadn't manipulated and used Gothel, then Gothel would probably be ruling the dead woods with her sisters now. So many things would be different. "My darling, it's so much more complicated than that. Quiet your mind. Don't dwell on what might have been." Nanny patted Circe's hand tenderly. "The 3 good fairies are with Tulip, Oberon, and the Tree Lords, doing their best to heal the wounded." Nanny was eyeing her sister and Circe, clearly worried about both of them. Circe had so many questions, and there was so much to say. But they were being dragged into yet another of her mother's dramas, and she felt she'd better find out what was really going on before the fairy godmother fretted herself into another tizzy. "Perhaps we check in on your mothers in the dreamscape? See what they're up to?" asked Nanny. Circe took her hand mirror out of her pocket. She dreaded seeing them just then. But if they were planning to try to lure Maleficent from beyond the veil, that would help her in her decision. She'd been looking the other way for far too long when it came to her mothers, and it was time to put a stop to their antics and skullduggery. "Show me the odd sisters," Circe spoke, and the words caught in her rapid breathing. Rather than showing the odd sisters, the mirror filled with familiar green flames. "Do you think your mother succeeded in bringing her back?" Nanny's face was filled with worry. "I will never forgive my mothers if they drag that poor creature back from the dead. It will break Nanny's heart," thought Circe, grasping the mirror so hard it might have broken. "Maleficent," Circe asked, her voice shaking, "is that you?" No. A familiar pale face with large dark eyes appeared in the flames. "I've not seen the dark fairy in the world of mirrors. I believe she's passed beyond the veil." "Groomhilda!" Nanny snatched the mirror from Circe's shaking hand. "What do you want, witch?" "My daughter, of course. I'm giving you 1 day to return her to me. If she isn't back home safely within her own castle by this time tomorrow, you will suffer my consequences." "Snow will never forgive you if you do this," whispered Circe. "How dare you speak of my daughter? You spawn of guile, insanity, wretchedness. Listen to me well. I will rain terror upon your heads if my daughter is not returned to me. You have until tomorrow." The wicked queen's face disappeared into the green mist, leaving the ladies awestruck and afraid.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this reading. If you haven't had a chance to, please take a second, like, subscribe, ring that notification bell, comment down below, share with a friend, and check out some of the other villain series chapters and books as well. Join us next time And remember, let it go and keep moving forward. Have a magical day. Bye.